I'm reading out of Lord of the Horizon. It is a book by Joan Marshall Grant. She was a writer of her own previous incarnations. This is her incarnation as Ra-Ab, plays in ancient Egypt a long, long time ago, and she was a male. We are here in chapter 4, and they have gone to the tomb of Senusert, who was a poisonous influence, a Babylonian. Mummy dust. Teten was waiting for me at the edge of the excavation. Ra-Ab, he said urgently, we have forgotten to bring the canopic jars. Everything must be buried. There must be nothing left with which she could make a link. You must fetch them, for I shall need all my vitality for what I still have to do. I put down the things I was carrying and ran off through the darkness towards the tomb. I knew that Senusert would be waiting for me beside the empty sarcophagus. I halted by the outer door to light the lamp, and its thin flame was like a sword in my hand against the shadow. As I entered the tomb chamber, the flame flickered. It was much more than the light from a lamp. It was a symbol of my will, which she was trying to quench. In the darkness she would conquer, but so long as the oil burnt, my strength would prevail. I shielded the lamp with my hand. The stillness was profound, yet the flame flickered, as though someone were trying to blow it out. A sudden impulse made me open the chest which stood beyond the sarcophagus. It was filled with dresses, their pleats dry and brittle with age. I touched the flame to them. For a moment a thread of fire curled like a little gold snake, making a girdle for a ceremonial dress of blue fine linen. Then the myrrh and spices in which the clothes were packed leapt into sudden heat. The tomb chamber was flooded with orange light, and so fierce was the heat that the cedar wood chest split open like a lotus of fire. My fingers were clumsy as I broke the seals on the first of the canopic jars. The bitumen had set hard as the alabaster. I should not be able to draw out the heart or the lungs, the brain or the viscera. I should have to break the jars, but there was no time. No time while the fire was spreading. A voice spoke to me. She has lit the fire, Ra-Ab. The fire will be her torch to summon the guardians of her tomb. I knew it for the voice of a friend, yet not Teten. You must put out the fire, for when it reaches the outer door the cedar wood will burn, and the keepers of the city of the dead will come to take you, and you will die the death of a tomb robber. There's nothing which will put out the fire. Her toilet chest is of wood. It will burn as fiercely as the rest. There is nothing. Your kilt will burn. It will not smother the flames. It will only feed them. Then I heard myself saying aloud, the wine, you fool, Amenemhet's wine, which he gave to fulfill his promise. Break the seals. The wine jars were full, 3 cubits high. I lifted the first from its stand. As I broke the seal, the room lived with the scent of the grape. Smooth and golden, the wine splashed on the flames. They hissed like snakes recoiling, then flared up again. But when the second jar was empty, the room was in darkness. Twice I had to stumble through the black smoke to bring out the canopic jars. Should the tomb ever be opened, it would no longer be possible to conceal that it had no occupant to guard. I did not wait to seal the outer door. That must wait until I was free to return, if I were ever free. Deep in the excavation, abandoned with the rest of the working, was a slab of dressed stone shaped like an altar. On it lay the mummy of Senusert. Teten had slit open the bandages. Her naked body was a tribute to the art of the embalmer. She had always been thin. Now the skin clung a little more closely to the delicate bones. Even the paint on her eyelids had not lost its colour, but her lips were puckered, as though the fruit of revenge was bitter. even when the taste of it was fresh in her mouth. Her talon fingernails were sheathed with gold, and the pointed breasts were cupped with silver sesame flowers. Her body retained the curious quality of youth, as though she had died not as a woman of 50, but as a girl. Even her body looks alive. She has kept it so. As soon as I unwrapped the bandages, I knew that she would never be free so long as it was in existence. Why? Because she has created a fresh link between it and herself. Once it lived because she dwelt therein. The link was broken at death, but she has woven a new link. She has used it to keep herself bound into the narrow circle of her life as Kyosatoris, and even the flesh has taken on a semblance of immortality. She had not the powers to throw off the bandages or to raise the lid of the sarcophagus, and I doubt if she had ever wished to do so, but she has made the body of death the garment of her soul. In it she has lain quite content to dream as though the mummy wrappings were smooth linen on her bed place in the palace. In horror I exclaimed, "Then for years she has been buried alive? You forget that the lungs do not need air. This body has no lungs. They are in the jar you are holding. Or does it contain her heart, which needs no blood? Her bowels will neither fear nor pity can move, or her brain, which no longer commands her body to her will? Amenemhet tried to kill her, and the woman of the palace wailed that she was dead. The embalmer worked on her body for 40 days, and her tomb has been sealed for many years. Yet it is you and I who are going to kill her, Ra-Ab. We are going to burn her alive. She will not feel it, yet she will defend herself to the utmost of her power. Light the brazier and keep it fed with the oil I have charged in the name of Horus. See that each particle of what I hand you is completely consumed. She will take desperate means to make you falter, to quench the fire, to let even a finger joint fall into the sand and be forgotten. Only when her body has passed through the fire, my fire, will it be no more than dust. Give me your dagger." He took it and held the blade in the newly kindled flames. "In the name of Horus, let this blade be tempered to my will. It must kill, that life may be given. It must sear, that the sick may be healed. It must sever, that there may be growth. It must destroy, that there will be creation." Then Teten went to the foot of the corpse, and I knew that at its head there stood the woman to whom this body still belonged. "Kyosatoris, you have died and were set free, but you have made yourself a prisoner. Therefore you shall again enter this body, so that when you leave it by fire, it shall be to return to life. Therefore you shall again enter this body, so that when you leave it by fire, it shall be to return into life. I, Teten, son of Horus, command you in the name of my hawk to enter this body. You shall breathe though you have no lungs. Your heart shall beat though you have no blood in your veins. You shall hear me though your ears are stopped with myrrh. The smoke of your bones shall enter your nostrils, though they are closed with bitumen." He took the heels of her narrow feet in the palm of his hand. "Many times, many hundreds of times, you have left your tomb for the palace of Amenemhet, where whispers still echo, which were born of your hatred. Many times you walked to the room to which came the spies you set upon your husband, and upon your daughter, and upon Pharaoh, and upon other spies, and your feet have carried you on all these journeys and been obedient to you. Do you remember that before you were known as the Babylonian? For then you lived among people of the same race. These feet ran through the gardens of your father when you were still a child, before you became ambitious. Do you remember your foster sister and the tame gazelle which you allowed her to share? You had forgotten her. Remember that you loved her. that you still love her even though she has been dead so much longer than you? Do you remember your mother? You hated her, but it was from her that you inherited such small, fine bones and that quiet face by which so many people have been deceived. These feet have carried you along the gentle paths of a child to a foreign court, to Egypt. Everyone who heard your footsteps has been sorry. Your husband, because he thought you were a fool. Your children, because they feared that even your affection had tentacles which sought to smother them. Your servants, because you had not the gift of benevolent authority. Pharaoh, because he knew that the sound of your feet echoed his own loneliness. But there have been 3 times when your footsteps were awaited with joy. By the gazelle, whom you never failed to care for when you were a child. By a servant of your father's house, who had been your foster mother. You comforted her when she was dying, and with her last breath she blessed you. By a beggar beside the road, somewhere in the land of Caesar on your way to Egypt. Cedar, from the land of Cedar on your way to Egypt. You gave him gold when he had hoped only for a handful of corn. He never forgot you, and on your bounty he raised 2 sons, who always remember your name in their dawn prayer. Your feet, because they were 3 times blessed, shall no longer walk in the way of a prisoner. Tatan raised the dagger above his head. Swift as a plunging hawk he cut down to the thigh bones. In a few moments the tendons were severed. Into my hands he put the legs of the Babylonian. The flesh of thigh and calf was smooth as the skin of a living woman. Cold sweat rolled down my face as I fed the long, slender legs into the brazier. The toes bent upwards as though she was trying to draw herself to her full height. The flesh charred quickly. The smoke was thick as oil. I'm sorry, I'm just looking how long this is. Now Teten was holding her 2 hands in one of his. In these hands you have so often held out a poisoned wine cup to Amenemhet. That poison is more familiar to them than malachite. Many have died at your hand, and though their blood never touched your fingers, the stain is upon them. Your hands have held treasure which was unclean, and with it you have tempted those who, had they had strength to resist, might still be living in contentment. Your hands have destroyed many bright-winged insects, for that gave you more satisfaction even than tearing the petals from a flower. Both were symbols of the woman you meant to destroy when you became the royal wife. You used to give them names, do you remember? The names of women you thought men had favored, women more wise, more incorruptible than yourself. When you destroyed a number of flowers or insects to which you had given their names, you found that the women sickened, and you began to discover your power for evil. It was amusing to hear that someone you disliked had begun to fail in health, to lose her comeliness, even though you were not able to tell her of the little pile of butterfly wings and the heads of moths kept in the box on whose lid was her name. It was not always a woman. Sometimes it was the name of a man who had displeased you with his indifference. Do you remember the soft feel of a moth's head before you crushed it, and how it left a smear like mummy dust on your fingertips? Do you remember how the handle of the whip you used upon the backs of your servants grew slippery, when the thong cut so deep that the blood spurted? Do you remember the feel of earth under your nails as you severed the roots of plants which your husband had admired? You were jealous of him, even though it was not love, but only admiration that you craved. But I have not forgotten that once your hand was cool on the forehead of Senusert, when he had a fever, and for a little while you forgot that he was the heir through whom you hoped to rule Egypt. and remembered only that he was a little boy who called to you through the darkness. You sat by him all night. Your hands brought peace to him, and they were gentle. Those gentle hands you shall carry with you. The rest shall be cleansed of blood in my fire. Again the knife fell. I held the stumps of the severed arms upright in the brazier, pressing them down against the heat, which slowly, so very slowly, consumed them. The wrist bones were thin and brittle, the long, narrow hands of Kelsey. Suddenly they opened, curled back as though they took the posture of a ritual dance. Then the fingers reached forward into talons, the golden nails glittering like fresh blood in the light of the fire. I tried to tell myself that it was only due to tendons contracting in the heat, but the slowly moving fingers had the terrible fascination of a cobra, whose head sways from side to side before it strikes. I knew by Teten's voice that he was nearing exhaustion. Your body has given sorrow to so many, but to your foster mother it brought contentment, for her own child had died, and in you she saw the fulfillment of her pain. Your body has been to you a faithful servant, neither inconveniencing you by weakness nor importunating you by its desires. But have you been to it a generous mistress? No, you have repaid its fidelity as though it was not a friend, but only a slave whom you despised. You have permitted it no indulgences when it wished to swim in the sea. You said that would not be becoming to your dignity. You grudged it even the benison of cool water. When you were 15, it bade you let it find fulfillment in the arms of a noble of your father's court. It implored you not to marry Amenemhet, for it found the body of a foreigner abhorrent. Yet you forced it to lie with an Egyptian, and when it protested you listened, but would not let yourself be guided by its voice. Your hatred grew, and to that hatred you gave heed, and plotted against the man whom you had chosen as the father of your children. Yet your body was stronger than you, for twice it refused to bear the child which it considered a violation of its privacy. It avenged itself on you, for a dead child is most agonizing to bear. You punished it for its disobedience with purges and salves which you had obtained from the foreign physician. Do you remember how your belly revolted against the mouse, steeped in honey, which he had advised, and against the broth of viper's eggs, which he said would protect you against poison? You had learned to listen to your body by the time your daughters were born. You shared in its protest, and yet the children lived. Your pitiful body has so many reasons to hate you. It has never known the caress of a man which it desired, or stirred with a child which it rejoiced to conceive. It has not suffered from gluttony, but it has received so many other needless pains at your command. For you thought that the secret cultivation of endurance would increase the power which you so ardently desired. Your body has brought comfort to no one, and it has aroused not even desire. Even when you no longer needed it for a garment, you would not let it rest, and you, in your turn, have become its slave. Now at last it shall be set free of its obedience. Then his voice took on a new quality, and he said to me, break the canopic jars and feed what they contain into the brazier. Before I did as he commanded, I thrust the hands of the Babylonian deep into the fire. For a moment they remained upright, palm to palm, as though in supplication. The brittle skin flared in the heat, and the finger bones fell apart as the beads fall when the thong of a necklace is broken. I had to use a heavy stone to break the jars. Their contents were no longer recognizable. All had been absorbed into a mass of resins. I turned to see that Teten had cut the trunk into 3 pieces. The body cavity had been filled with sweet gums, and the smell of myrrh was almost overpowering. The heart and the viscera burned with an intense flame, flaring up with such heat that I had not drawn back, it would have seared my face. Had I not drawn back, I expected at any moment to hear the shout of a guard. Surely now that the fire was leaping so high, its light must be clearly visible beyond the excavation. Her belly was smooth as the skin of a living woman. Even the breasts were still taut, like the breasts of a dancer who has never borne a child. It is nearly finished, Ra-Ab. Remember, everything must be consumed. Even a finger untouched by the fire might provide a new focus for her. I set the head upright on its neck in the center of the stone slab. The eyelids were closed, but it seemed as though they were about to flicker open. Surely she is not dead. She is only feigning sleep. Senusert, hear me. The head which bound you to earth is about to be consumed in my fire, even as your body has been consumed. Only those thoughts which were dedicated to Ra, even though you denied his name, shall you remember. The hands and the blood upon them are consumed, and the body which you betrayed is consumed also. The feet which you led among the thorns, having forsaken the causeway, they are as dust. You died in the palace. By your own will you were born again in your sarcophagus. That half-life is ended. When this head falls into ash, the last link shall be severed. You shall be born in a new body, in a new time, in a new country. The woman, Senusert, you shall forget, until you have gained sufficient wisdom not to be endangered by the lust for power. Unless you can destroy me, you must acknowledge Ra to be stronger than Set. In Ra's service you shall be born, and the stench of the caverns of the underworld shall be an abomination to your nostrils, and you will forsake the ways of evil, and you shall again follow the road to the horizon. I, Teten, in the name of Ra and of Horus his son, challenged you. Prove yourself stronger than I, or accept peace at my hand. Destroy me, or be healed by me. Blind me, or see because of me. Make me deaf, or hear the voice of truth, and be no longer deceived by Set. Hear my challenge, Senusert. Either destroy me or accept my command, and, accepting, go into freedom. I could see Teten's arms outstretched in front of him, and the head of the mummy resting upright on its neck, but I realized that these were only the symbols of two embattled powers. I shall never know how long it was before Teten's hands fell to his side, and in a voice exultant but very weary he said, "She is free, Ra-Ab. You may burn her head." I held it, staring down at the closed eyes and quiet mouth. Against my palms I could feel the small, proud ears. The modeling of the skull was delicate, and the skin was smooth over the temples. Gently I rested the head on the red ambers. The hair caught, and for a moment she wore a crown of fire. Did I imagine it, or did the eyelids open and eyes full of life and intelligence? Eyes no longer are cold and arrogant. Look up at me. Did she cry out as she felt the fire lap against her mouth? Or was it only air sucked by the heat out of the empty skull? So, wow, that was the end of this chapter, Mummy Dust. And the next chapter, 8, is Narrow Victory. Have a good Wednesday.